Federalist number 12. Uh-oh. This sounds like it's going to be about taxes. Not good. The utility of the Union in respect to revenue. The effects of union upon the commercial prosperity of the states have been sufficiently delineated. Its tendency to promote the interests of revenue will be the subject of our present inquiry. The prosperity of commerce is now perceived and acknowledged by all enlightened statesmen to be the most useful as well as the most productive source of national wealth, and has accordingly become a primary object of their political cares. By multiplying the means of gratification, by promoting the introduction and circulation of the precious metals, those darling objects of human avarice and enterprise, it serves to vivify and invigorate the channels of industry and to make them flow with greater activity and copiousness. The assiduous merchant, the laborious husbandman, the active mechanic, and the industrious manufacturer, all orders of men, look forward with eager expectation and growing alacrity to this pleasing reward of their toils. The often agitated question between agriculture and commerce has, from indubitable experience, received a decision which has silenced the rivalship that once subsisted between them, and has proved, to the satisfaction of their friends, that their interests are intimately blended and interwoven. And it's basically just saying, like, hey, trade is good. When we say commerce, we're referring to trade, I'm guessing, right? As commerce is trade. So trade is good. Trade with other nations is good. Trade through all of our lands is good. Like, trade is good for everybody, too. Everybody benefits from trade. Cute. Globalist arguments. I think, assuming that's what commerce is meaning here. It has been found in various countries that, in proportion as commerce has flourished, land has risen in value. And how could it have happened? Otherwise? Could that which procures a freer vent for the products of the earth, which furnishes new incitements to the cultivation of land, which is the most powerful instrument in increasing the quantity of money in a state, could that, in fine, which is the faithful handmaid of labor and industry in every shape, fail to augment that article, which is the prolific parent of far the greatest part of the objects upon which they are exerted? Basically that, like, right? Like, if you're grabbing shit from the earth, if you're, like, mining shit, if you're farming shit, if you're doing all this, like, being able to sell it or ship it or send it to other people is, like, based, I think, basically. I don't know the context for a lot of this. Someone in chat said, free commerce was kind of a revolutionary ideal because of British imperial mercantilism. That might be it as well. Yeah, so maybe free trade and all that's just become, like, a big thing, yeah. It is astonishing that so simple a truth should ever have had an adversary, and it is one among a multitude of proofs how apt a spirit of ill-informed jealousy or of too great abstraction and refinement is to lead men astray from the plainest truths of reason and conviction. The ability of a country to pay taxes must always be proportioned, in a great degree, to the quantity of money in circulation and to the celerity with which it circulates. Commerce, contributing to both these objects, must of necessity render the payment of taxes easier and facilitate the requisite supplies to the treasury. The hereditary dominions of the Emperor of Germany contain a great extent of fertile, cultivated, and populous territory, a large proportion of which is situated in mild and luxuriant climates. In some parts of this territory are to be found the best gold and silver mines in Europe. And yet, from the want of the fostering influence of commerce, that monarch can boast but slender revenues. He has several times been compelled to owe obligations to the pecuniary succors of other nations for the preservation of his essential interests, and is unable, upon the strength of his own resources, to sustain a long or continued war. I think it's basically saying that, like, having even if a country or an emperor might own a lot of land or a lot of natural resources, like, because everybody's, like, buying and selling and trading with each other, like, you still kind of have to participate in these global markets or else you fall behind, basically. Even though they've got the best gold and silver mines, the monarch can only have but slender revenues because of the fostering influence of commerce, and then the monarch is compelled to owe obligations to the, what does this word mean? Hold on.
Pecuniary.
Pecuniary. Relating to, okay. Suckers. succors. Is it succor or
Succor.
succors? Yeah. Of other nations for the preservation of his essential interests and is unable upon the strength of its own resources to sustain a longer continued war. I think we're becoming like more interdependent and more, yeah. Oh wait, Destiny split VOD. Oh shit, can I? I hope this works. Good luck. Fuck. Wait. Okay, hopefully that's uploaded. Good luck. Ooh. Okay, sorry. But it is not in this aspect of the subject alone that union will be seen to conduce to the purpose of revenue. There are other points of view in which its influence will appear more immediate and decisive. It is evident from the state of the country, from the habits of the people, from the experience that we have had on the point itself, that it is impracticable to raise any very considerable sums by direct taxation. Tax laws have in vain been multiplied, new methods to enforce the collection have in vain been tried, the public expectation has been uniformly disappointed, and the treasuries of the state have remained empty. The popular system of administration inherent in the nature of popular government, coinciding with the real scarcity of money, incident to a languid and mutilated state of trade, has hitherto defeated every experiment for extensive collections and has at length taught the different legislatures the folly of attempting them. No person acquainted with what happens in other countries will be surprised at this circumstance. In so opulent a nation as that of Britain, where direct taxes from superior wealth must be much more tolerable, and from the vigor of the government, much more practicable than in America, far the greatest part of the national revenue is derived from taxes of the indirect kind, from imposts and from excises. Duties on imported articles form a large branch of this latter description. Oh, it's the Trump taxes. He's saying we can't really raise income taxes. Like, nobody wants to pay that shit. And even in Britain, where the crown can go after it, they're still not collecting that shit. So we have to put duties and import taxes on stuff. In America, it is evident that we must a long time depend for the means of revenue chiefly on such duties. Duty is another name, I believe, for like import and maybe export taxes, but maybe import taxes. Duties imported, okay. I think we've already I think at this point we've even had, I think this already happened before the Constitution was even, was this in response to the stamp tax or a tax that they tried to do? I don't remember. Oh yeah, to the state government's increased efforts to collect taxes on both individuals and their trades. This Constitution ratified, and we did the Constitution in 1788. This was 1786, okay, yeah. Do you think the stock markets have already priced in Trump's tariffs? No, I think the stock markets are assuming it's not going to happen. I think most people, even I would assume that hopefully that, can't. Okay. In America, it is evident that we must a long time depend for the means of revenue chiefly on such duties. In most parts of it, excises must be confined within a narrow compass. The genius of the people will ill brook the inquisitive and peremptory spirit of excise laws. The pockets of the farmers, on the other hand, will reluctantly yield but scanty supplies in the unwelcome shape of impositions on their houses and lands, and personal property is too precarious and invisible a fund to be laid hold of in any other way than by the imperceptible agency of taxes on consumption. So basically, whatever we tax, it's got to be like a pretty narrow tax because people are going to find ways to get around it, right? People are smart, they'll get around it. Farmers are fucked, though, because like, how are they going to get around it if it's just like agricultural products, I guess, that they're shipping out? So that's not good, right? You'd have like uneven treatment here, I guess. If these remarks have any foundation, that state of things which will best enable us to improve and extend so valuable a resource must be best adapted to our political welfare. And it cannot admit of a serious doubt that this state of things must rest on the basis of a general union. As far as this would be conducive to the interests of commerce, so far it must tend to the extension of the revenues to be drawn from that source. As far as it would contribute to rendering regulations for the collection of the duties more simple and efficacious, so far it must serve to answer the purposes of making the same rate of duties more productive and of putting it into the power of the government to increase the rate without prejudice to trade. So, I'm speaking a little bit out of my area of expertise because I don't know any of the history. But I think that even as early as the colonies, you still had this huge difference between, or when they even say in the earlier Federalist Papers, the northern people are fishermen, they're merchants, they want to do commerce, like higher level like goods and buying and selling. Like that's what the North does, and the South is still like slaves, agriculture. Like it's two very different economies. And two different styles of economies. And the idea of making the Union part of the Federalist Papers, the Constitution, everything else, is trying to assuage the South of saying like, hey, listen, we're not going to fuck your shit up. Like we know that the North has a different style of economy, and we know that the South is different, but we're all going to try to work together and make this like balance between both sides. Like shit's not going to be like super fucked. Okay. The relative, hold on. There's arguments that taxation needs to be done effectively in regards to this, to commerce, agriculture, so one side isn't disfavored. The relative situation of these states, the number of rivers with which they are intersected, and of bays that wash their shores, the facility of communication in every direction, the affinity of language and manners, the familiar habits of intercourse, all these are circumstances that would conspire to render an illicit trade between them a matter of little difficulty, and would ensure frequent evasions of the commercial regulations of each other. The separate states or confederacies would be necessitated by mutual jealousy to avoid the temptations to that kind of trade by the lowness of their duties. The temper of our governments for a long time to come would not permit those rigorous precautions by which the European nations guard the avenues into their respective countries, as well by land as by water, and which, even there, are found insufficient obstacles to the adventurous stratagems of avarice. Oh, I think this argument here is like, okay, listen, if you really do try to make 4 countries, if we do 4 confederacies here instead of the United States, literally nobody's going to pay taxes. Like people are going to find so many ways around this. How are you going to tax people coming out of the North who are going to like hide in through different rivers or different like there's just never going to work. But if we're all just one country, we don't have to pay like taxes going between the states. I think is like the argument here basically, right? In France, there is an army of patrols, as they are called, constantly employed to secure their fiscal regulations against the inroads of the dealers in contraband trade. Mr. Neckar computes the number of these patrols at upwards of 20,000. This shows the immense difficulty in preventing that species of traffic where there is an inland communication and places in a strong light the disadvantages with which the collection of duties in this country would be encumbered. If by disunion the states should be placed in a situation with respect to each other resembling that of France with respect to her neighbors, the arbitrary and vexatious powers with which the patrols are necessarily armed would be intolerable in a free country. Contraband and illegal trade, would it necessarily occur and thrive? It would require immensely powerful patrols, as in France, to stop. If, on the contrary, there be but one government pervading all the states, there will be, as to the principal part of our commerce, but one side to guard, the Atlantic coast. Vessels arriving directly from foreign countries, laden with valuable cargoes, would rarely choose to hazard themselves to the complicated and critical perils which would attend attempts to unlade prior to their coming into port. They would have to dread both the dangers of the coast and of detection, as well after as before their arrival at the places of their final destination. An ordinary degree of vigilance would be competent to the prevention of any material infractions upon the rights of the revenue. A few armed vessels, judiciously stationed at the entrances of our ports, might at a small expense be made useful sentinels of the laws. The government having the same interest to provide against violations everywhere, the cooperation of its measure in each state would have a powerful tendency to render them effectual. Here, also, we should preserve by union an advantage which nature holds out to us, and which would be relinquished by separation. The United States lie at a great distance from Europe, and at a considerable distance from all other places with which they would have extensive connections of foreign trade. The passage from them to us in a few hours or in a single night, as between the coasts of France and Britain, and of other neighboring nations, would be impracticable. This is a prodigious security against a direct contraband with foreign countries, but a circuitous contraband to one state through the medium of one another would be both easy and safe. Circuitous. The difference between a direct importation from abroad and an indirect importation through the channel of a neighboring state in small parcels, according to time and opportunity, with the additional facilities of inland communication, must be palpable to every man of discernment. Basically saying that, like, if we're different countries, obviously it'd be easier to sneak shit in, but if we're like one country, that would be much more difficult, right? Yeah. For foreign powers. It is therefore evident that one national government would be able, at much less expense, to extend the duties on imports, beyond comparison, further than would be practicable to the states separately or to any partial confederacies. Hitherto, I believe, it may safely be asserted that these duties have not upon an average exceeded in any state 3%. In France, they are estimated to be about 15%, and in Britain, they exceed this proportion. There seems to be nothing to hinder their being increased in this country to at least treble their present amount. The single article of ardent spirits under federal regulation might be made to furnish a considerable revenue. Upon a ratio to the importation into this state, the whole quantity imported into the United States may be estimated at 4 millions of gallons, at a shilling per gallon, would produce 200,000 pounds. That article would well bear this rate of duty, and if it should tend to diminish the consumption of it, such an effect would be equally favorable to the agriculture, to the economy, to the morals, and to the health of our society. There is perhaps nothing so much a subject of national extravagance as these spirits. So basically, we can tax shit coming in, it'll be easy to make a lot of money, and if people consume less of it, then it'll help our domestic production. Wow, the Trump arguments for taxation. What will be the consequence? We are not able to avail ourselves of the resource in question in its full extent. A nation cannot long exist without revenues. Destitute of this essential support, it must resign its independence and sink into the degraded condition of a province. This is an extremity to which no government will of choice accede. Revenue, therefore, must be had at all events. In this country, if the principal part be not drawn from commerce, it must fall with oppressive weight upon land. It has been already intimated that excises, in their true significance, are too little in unison with the feelings of the people to admit of great use being made of that mode of taxation. Nor, indeed, in the states where almost the sole employment is agriculture, are the objects proper for excise sufficiently numerous to permit very ample collections in that way. Basically, like, obviously the North and the South both favor very different modes of taxation, and one would greatly benefit one, greatly hurt the other, right? Personal estate, as has been remarked, from the difficulty in tracing it, cannot be subjected to large contributions by any other means than by taxes on consumption. In populous cities, it may be enough the subject of conjecture to occasion the oppression of individuals without much aggregate benefit to the state, but beyond these circles, it must, in a great measure, escape the eye and the hand of the tax gatherer. As the necessities of the state, nevertheless, must be satisfied in some mode or other, the defect of other resources must throw the principal weight of public burdens on the possessors of land. And as, on the other hand, the wants of the government can never obtain an adequate supply unless all the sources of revenue are open to its demands, the finances of the community under such embarrassments cannot be put into a situation consistent with its respectability or its security. Thus, we shall not even have the consolations of a full treasury to atone for the oppression of that valuable class of the citizens who are employed in the cultivation of the soil, but public and private distress will keep pace with each other in gloomy concert and unite in deploring the infatuation of those councils which led to disunion. Cute. Okay. Okay, that was 12.